over to try and do the 3 metre, like that 10-foot mark.
Yep.
Should be able to do it right on top of the sandbank at the moment.
So what are we doing?
Huh?
What are we doing?
I call it plumbing the depth.
Okay.
Just basically working out how deep your lure actually goes, so you've got an understanding of where it is in the water column when you're going over top of reefs and stuff like that.
Yep.
So at the moment we're just running over top of a sandbank, and it's probably a little bit high in the tide to do it. We may still be right. Try and get work out our 10-foot depth on our lure. So just cast him out, make sure he's swimming right, straight and everything at a decent speed. So about 4 to 5 knots. Tune him up if you have to. Let him out until he starts hitting bottom, really. And while I'm doing this, I just leave it in the rod holder. So we're just running over a sandbank, so there's no, you're not going to snag up. She's just going to plough into the actual bottom. And you know it's hitting bottom when it starts. It'll take a little while to get down to depth.
So you're just gradually letting more line out?
Yep. So that's hitting bottom now. Just ploughing bottom. See how it's doing that?
Yep. Sort of rapid and deep bumps?
Yeah. It's just hitting the sand on the bottom. So what I do is, I know that's 10 foot now, and I get a Sharpie and just colour in 2 little stripes, 1 or 2 little stripes on the line, let it dry. And then from that point, I actually head out on the sandbank into deep water with the line still out. Like I said, it's not going to snag up, just bouncing over the contours on the bottom.
And it's all sand, so you don't have to worry about the snags. And so where are we heading now, 12 feet?
12 feet. Try and find that contour on the bottom. So we're at about 11. Just make sure it's not a fish.
Weather really turned it on for us today. It's pretty nice out.
We're just trying to get it down to that 12-foot mark. I might run out of line on this bait caster.
And so will you go out further and then wind it back in until you get to a sweet spot, or?
Yeah.
Because obviously...
So if it's, I probably should have done that at the 10-foot until it's just only
hitting.
ticking over every now and again, not like trying to
constantly
plough right into it. So we're sitting at about 4.7 knots.
And is 4.5 knots sort of where you'll troll at? Do you go a bit slower than that or faster?
Most of my cod actually come off doing about 3.8.
Yep.
See, that's tapping bottom every now and again.
And we did catch a good cod on the troll just earlier. Nearly, what was it, 44? That's on the bottom again.
Yep. So just bumping. Just try and get off. We kind of come over a bit of a hump in this. So I do this on the sandbank that's out front of the Gattaca's boat ramp. So it's fairly flat. But yeah, like I was saying with the cod, they like it slower a lot more often. The trout can vary from sweet spot for them is probably about 4 knots, 4.5 knots, up to say 5.5. The mackerel, like they like it pretty quick. Plus you cover ground too.
So 6
Good
or
for
7.
Yeah. Good for searching for new ground too. On your sounder.
Yeah, because you can cover more.
Cover more. We just come back off into a little bit more steady bottom. Kind of come back up again. Just trying to find that real smooth spot of around that 12-foot mark. So it's just tapping on all the little lumps in between. And don't be surprised out here on this sandbank you catch a golden or something too.
Yeah.
So now that's steady 12.
Now obviously you have to have a lure running that's capable of diving these depths as well, yeah?
Yeah, and this one's just on the verge of
So it runs between what, 10 and 12 feet?
10 and 12 feet. There she goes.
Yep. Just chuck a couple lines on that and that'll be your 12.
I'd probably put 3.
Three nice big solid ones so you can see them.
So as it's running off.
Yep, give it time to dry.
Yep, I can roll that, wind that back up because we're coming back up into 10 foot now.
Yep. Will you just wind it up to your next set of plumb lines?
Yep, but at the moment we're going to wind in and head over to Gadigas and around Point Vernon.
Yep.
Do a bit of a troll and find some reef structures to troll over.
Perfect.
And I like to get up into about that 15-foot mark.
Yep.
So we've just worked the lures down to that 10 and 12 feet mark. And then when we're in the 12 to 15 mark, we'll run through and the rocky outcrops and the coral bommies and stuff like that. We're running our lures over it, trying not to snag them up. Trying not to snag them up. But I just want to, the reason for doing this is just to try and get more people running some lures around some pretty gnarly country and picking up some good fish without costing an absolute fortune. Because if you look at that, if we know our lure depths at 15 foot, that fish is sitting at 16.6. So like when we plumb our depths to find out where the lure is actually going to be, we're running right along above him. He can jump up and have a swipe at it or ignore it.
Get it right in front of his face that way.
Yeah, trying to get it as close to the fish as possible, because when it's top of the tide and bottom of the tide, the fish will actually come out and move around the reef. But when there's a bit of a run, they'll actually tuck down and bed down in the reef. So if I find any little any little kind of rocky lumps with some bait on it, I'll actually put a little mark down, and we'll just dot all the rocky points. And on the side scan you can actually see the rock outcrops coming out, little bommies, maybe coral, and it's a good way to find big boulders and actually press on it and put another rock mark off to one side. So it's actually that mark there.
Yep.
Going underneath, and then there's some fish beside us. So we've plumbed our depth down to 14 foot, which is good to go over top of something like that. So we'll get our lures out. And when I'm doing this myself, I'll only use one rod. And you need to try and work out that's the 10-foot mark we had. We want the deeper one. Yep. So a couple of marks on the sides. So we know that's sitting around the depth. And I know that's sitting at around that 14-foot mark, that one. That 12 to 14-foot mark. So if I come across a coral bommy in my travels, in my dot to dots, that's actually sitting less than 14 feet, I'll actually pick my rod up and actually hold it. I won't leave it in the rod holder to go over top of the gnarly stuff. It's one way to lose lures pretty quick, and by actually picking it up, if you look at the sounder, you can see what I'm talking about. You can actually work your lure over top of all those rocks, and there's a fish sitting on top. By actually working it backwards and forwards, tapping the rocks as you go. And if it starts banging into the rocks too much, you can hold your rod straight up to the sky, which then in turn lifts it from there to what, 1.5 meters, 2 meters higher than what it was.
Yep. And how much will that lift translate on the lure? Give it an extra foot or two, or
a couple of meters up?
It'll match.
Yeah, because what we plumbed our depth to,
yep,
was sitting here like that, and that's tap and bottom. And I just dropped my rod back to stop it from snagging up.
Yep.
It was about to snag, you
Yep.
could actually feel it. And I thumb my spool, and if it was a fish, it would come with.
Yep.
So that's free spooling at the moment. We are snagged.
You're just hoping that float of the lure will bring itself back off?
I think it's pretty well stuck.
Oh no.
But that's the other thing. If we try and keep running directly back on it, there's no point having two rods out if you're by yourself doing this.
Yeah, it'd be too much work for one person.
Just have the motor in gear.
In reverse?
Yep, in reverse. I put it in neutral when I hit and snagged. And the idea is not to strike on the lure when it goes into the snag.
Yeah. So
And
waiting to identify a fish from a snag is...
like, you need to do it in like split second.
Yep.
Thumb the spool, and see if it's going to come with. If it doesn't, then you know it's not a fish and it's a rock, and then you can just free spool it. I like overheads for it because it's just easier.
Yep.
And if you can go as close to straight back as possible, the lure should just be bibbed into the actual rocks or coral.
Yep. So you go trace it back over it, you should pull it backwards?
Yeah, don't go around in a circle.
No, because you wrap the rock, right?
Yeah, coral and braids like Velcro.
Yep. Yeah, it just digs
Velcro and a wool blanket.
in. Yep.
As soon as it touches it, it's wrapped up. You won't be getting anything back.
Yep.
But I'll run quite a long leader, 1.5, 2 metre leader. Just so when it's stuck in on the rocks, you're not, it's not going to snap off as much. And I use a 60, 70 pound rock leader, hard fluorocarbon leader, and I'm running 30 pound braid. So we are going back slowly. See if it was a fish. That is a gnarly.
It was a big rock, was it?
Yeah. Gnarly. Bomby, that one. You just definitely don't want to strike on the... I've seen so many people just pick up their rod and yeah, I'm on, and just full on lock it up and just peel drag. It's a surefire way to get it fully snagged and not coming off. You just want to come straight past, and if it... Best chance of and then pop it off. A few taps of the rod butt.
Oh, that worked nicely.
And that was, the bib was just dug into that.
Yep.
So at least I didn't lose a lure on camera. So if you can, hold it forward, your rod.
Yep, and what's that do?
It just gives you a little bit more slack to throw your lure back and let it float back over that rock.
Yep.
When it whacks into it. And like, you do get used to your fish strikes to your snags. Like a fish strike is quite violent, where a rock is quite not violent. He just sits there.
It just
he
pulls
just pulls
straight.
line like straight. Where a fish actually shakes his head around after you've set the hooks. So I run, like, it's a fairly heavy drag. Plus that little bit just made me knock the tops of those rocks. And now I know if I'm going over something a little bit shallower or deeper, I can move my mark up and down my rod length and play with it as we get into a little bit deeper water, put it back out again. Run it down deeper. There's some fish sitting quite deep on that one. I do work it a little bit, just try and get a little bit of action into it sometimes.
Yep, just a back and forth to
Back and forth.
imitate the darting.
Yeah. And now we're coming up a little bit shallower. So I'll wind back up until I get my marks back in. Just wound them back up. We're sitting in 15 foot. It does take a bit of, that's a fish. So we're running over top of the fish's head, and one just had a swipe at that.
Are you on?
I'm calling cod. Little cod. Be a little
One of those wire net ones.
honeycomb cod or
Yeah.
wire netting cod.
They frequent this area. I've caught hundreds of them here.
There he comes.
You can see him all the way back out there, coming along the surface with it.
Kick, kick. So he was tied into the rocks and the lure was running over top of his head, and he's darted up to grab it.
Yep.
So he's a little...
It's a little wire net cod.
Yep. Little dark
Hexagonal.
one.
That's actually not a bad size for those little guys.
Yeah.
They don't ever get to legal, do they?
Oh, what are their maximum sizing? 40 centimetres?
Yeah, I think 38 is the minimum legal and they only grow to a maximum of 40. So you very rarely ever see one of those in the wild that's keepable. He's sewn himself shut.
Yep. 2 barbs out. Other barb out.
Give him a kiss for good luck.
What? Off he goes to annoy me another day. But the reason why I popped that in the rod holder, because it was pretty flat country there. There was just a little bit of rocks and stuff like that, and I was giving myself a break until we got to some real gnarly stuff again.
Yep.
So it comes by time in the water to work out what you can and can't do around the place. Because there is, when you start getting up around the 5 knots mark, there's a fair bit of load on your arm.
Oh, okay, it gets a bit tiring.
Yeah. So if you get a sandy patch in between, take a break, put it in the upright rod holder if you want. It lifts it even higher off of the bottom. As soon as you see it come back up on the finder, pull it out, put your tip down close to the water.
Well, that's
Dropping it close to the water, you'll get an extra foot or so of depth out of it.
Well, that'd be convenient with the sounder showing you what's under the boat and the lure being further out behind it. You get a bit of time to put it in the zone when you spot it.
So we're going over a bit of flat stuff now.
A couple little sand patches out here that are good whiting ground actually.
Yep. So we're doing 4.2. We might speed it up a bit. We'll go in, we're just finding a couple of these little reefy spots. So I'm the boat's sitting at doing 5.2, 5.2, 5.3. A little birdie told me that the trout like this at the moment, so it would be really good to pick up a trout while we're doing this. And while we're doing this, if you're doing this with a Dr. Evil or something like that, that big bib, it will actually near rip the rod out of your hand. So you want something that will get down to depth but won't put a lot of load on your rod.
Speaking of rod, what kind of rod do you use for this sort of trolling? Is there a minimum weight class that you would want it? Do you go heavier or light?
Probably a medium type. I use this for barramundi as well.
Yep.
Barramundi and Murray cod.
Okay. So that'd take a fair punishing then. You'd be able to put a few kilos on it.
It's not a flash rod, it's just a very comfortable rod for doing this kind of thing.
Yep.
I wouldn't use this for like your bass fishing kind of thing. It's a bit of overkill. And when you hit a trout,
they're quite aggressive.
They do actually hit quite hard. The little cod from this morning, I called it for a trout the way he hit it.
Yeah, he's pretty violent.
Yeah. And we were doing 5 knots on him and he took that, so. We got a couple of kayakers coming at us. Here's a good little formation on the sounder. One of the little fingers, the rocks in between the hollow in the middle. So this lure is not getting down to that depth at the moment. You tend to find those fish, instead of sitting that tight to the bottom, will actually, when the tide drops out, they'll actually come up in the water column and move around a little bit more. Just what I noticed. This is where I tend to hook up to something that doesn't like to come in.
What do you reckon, GT?
I'm thinking.
I've heard tell of a few big GTs off the end of this rock spit here at the Eagle's Nest.
It hits my lure, runs straight for shore, and then turns and goes straight back out into the deep, but runs it right around here we go, into a shallower spot. So I'm holding my rod up high. That was a snag.
Managed to bounce it off.
Yep. So you'll watch my butt in a minute, the rod, not my butt. She'll. We're coming over some pretty shallow stuff, and that was out pretty far.
So you're just lifting that rod tip right up to get over the shallows.
Just to
Can you feel it tapping the bottom at all?
It's pretty shallow. I know it's going to actually snag up if I don't do this.
Yep.
So I'm trying to actually pick the fish up off the top of the point, and as soon as that actually taps over that point, I'll drop my rod tip back down and dive it into the hollow on the other side in between these gables, or the rock fingers that jut out into the water.
Yep.
Doing about that 4.4 knots. So if you had two rods and you're going through some gnarly rocks and reef, you're not going to get anything come back. You're going to have a
recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it's going to be a fight. Nope.
She's all right.
Yep. It's not.
Yeah, so the depth plumbing is a good, if you're consistently using one type of lure.
Yep. So I know these don't go as deep as what the others normally, but if we're going against tide as well, they will actually get deeper. So if we're running into the current, they'll actually go deeper and deeper, which is not ideal, because normally you want to go with the current. You can go slower against the current with your speed because your lure's getting that a little bit deeper. Just bring them up a little. Like it all comes down to playing with them a bit.
Like anything with fishing, isn't it? You got to put the time in.
Yep. But yeah, there's some pretty gnarly bommies, like coral bommies, all through here too, that I've been dusted up a few times on fish dragging me back into them. And thanks to Ian and Marg for showing us all this. It does work.
We'll have to do another tag along tour this year and take everyone out and show the new members this area as well.
And I just like trolling because it's a mixed bag most of the time.
You get a lot of bycatch.
Oh, you can get anything from golden trevally, any of the trevallies. Yeah, even mackerel. The young fellow I took out one day got a 113 broad bar just off the tip of the gables, and that's just doing what we're doing at the moment. So
just dragging a couple lures over a bit of rocky, rubbly ground.
And we're coming up to a little bit of shallower stuff now.
Not a bad way to spend the day.
Oh, If you have a look at the sounder, you can see all the rocks and stuff too.
Oi, catch! Alright, we're back. Put the drone in the air and had a bit of a look around. Saw a manta ray. It's pretty interesting.
Running a deeper version, but just shallow, close into the boat. And yeah, we are getting snagged up. We are getting them back. We haven't lost a lure yet today. If I can just, can't stress enough, if you get snagged up, you have to back up onto the lure, straight up onto it.
Straight back on your line, eh? No turning around.
No turning around, no going out wide to come in. You need to go back, straight back over your line until it's directly underneath you, and give it a couple of taps on the rod butt and it should just pop out, come out backwards. And try not to set the hooks into the coral or into the rocks. Lures don't like coming back to you after you do that.
Hot tip, save a few fishers a few dollars. Probably doing yourself out of a bit of business there, but
yeah.
You want people catching fish and having fun, right?
Or losing lures and buying more. But yeah, it's just, this is the way I used to fish all the rocky headlands, rocky points on all the dams, rocks and tree laydowns and all that kind of stuff for Murray cod and yellowbelly. So you just have to knock bottom with those, and just, they like sitting on drop-offs just over the other side of the points. So if you knock your lures up and over the point without snagging up, normally you get a hit on the other side. So that's what I started playing with out here for the coral trout and the cod. And you just need to find the structure. When the current's moving, you need to find structure and find those fish tucked away in their homes and try and get them to come out and say hello. I don't know if my chest camera can see it. Every time I'm trolling, I'm marking stuff as well. So I've got marks at different points, different areas, different runs. Just whenever you come over something that's a little bit of a lump or a bump or a rocky point, it's worth making note of it just to come back to and see again. So obviously that had bait on it last time, and that's why I marked it. I normally do the rocks as I've got a little rocky emblem on my sounder. We'll just try and go over it and see. Lone rocks I mark with the rock symbol, and then just play dot to dot. So on the side scan you can actually see that we're going over pretty rocky country.